Good day and welcome to today's lesson. So in today's lesson we are going to be looking at how to create a database and how to create a table, right? So for you to create your database, right now we have just finished establishing our connection to our MySQL. The next thing you need to do is the syntax is basically the same as this, but the next thing you need to do is that inside this your con.connect, you're going to come here and then we're going to write, first of all, write our SQL query. Now your SQL query is actually your SQL code, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's just say SQL equals to, and then I'm going to go ahead and write my SQL query inside this. I'll write create database, and I'll call the name of this database, let's just call it my_db, which is my database, right? Then I'm going to actually come here and write con.query, and then I'm going to put in my SQL as the first parameter. Then I'll go ahead and write function, takes in two parameters, takes in error parameter and result. And then we'll say if there's an error, as usual, throw error. I'll go ahead and say console.log database created. Go ahead and save that. Then we come down here, we press Ctrl C to clear everything. Then we run our code again. And as you can see, it says connected, database created. So basically that is how you can create your database on MySQL. Now the next thing we are going to do is that we're going to go ahead and create a table, right? So I'm going to go ahead and clean this. Again, the syntax is very similar. I'll go ahead and write let me store my table SQL query inside my SQL variable, and so this time I'm going to say create table. Then I'll put in my table name. Let's imagine we are creating a table called customers, so I'll say customers. And then now when creating a table, you need to specify certain parameters. Do you want your first, we are going to now create the columns in our table, right? So let's say for now the first column I want to create is a column that contains all my customers' names, and then so I'll call that column name, and then we'll give it certain characteristics. For example, I'll say voucher. You could, assuming you want, this determines the kind of data that is stored, data type of that column. So now this particular column name stores data type voucher, which means that special characters can also be imputed. If you want it to only be text, then you specify text, and if you want them to only store integer on that particular column, you put int, right? I want my voucher to the maximum number of characters I want my varchar to be able to carry. You can specify any number of characters, 255 characters. Let me go ahead and also create let's just say address, give that to a data type of varchar, and then go ahead and create that as an error. And then I also want it to have 255, right? So go ahead and close that. Then I'll come here and as usual con.query, put in my SQL query here and function. Takes into parameter error and result. I will say as usual if error, as it is an error, throw error, and then if there's no error, just console.log table created. Now before I actually run this code, there is something I like to do. There's what we call a primary key, right? And usually you select a particular column or you create your primary key column. Now normally I like to create my primary key as a column that simply numbers every single row, right? So my primary key normally auto increments. That means anytime I store a new value in my database, if the last row was row number 26, then my primary key for this next row will automatically become 27, and like that and like that. My primary key column will continue to auto increment as I add more rows to my table. Now what is so special about a primary key column, right, or making a particular column your primary key? Number one, usually we use these primary keys to connect one table to another table, right? And also you can use this primary key to uniquely identify rows in your table. So it's usually denoted as your ID. So I'll go ahead and create a column here. We usually call that column our ID, and then I want that column to be an integer, so I'll put int. I also want the value of that column to auto increment with every new row that comes in, so I'll write auto increment. That means it will increase. If the last column was 2, by the time a new row comes in, this particular column for that row will now be 3. By the time a new row comes in, the corresponding column will now be 4, and it will continue to increase automatically. That's the essence of this auto increment here. And then finally, let me specify that it is my primary key. So I'll go ahead and write primary key, comma. So I've just created a column called ID, and I say this column called ID should be an integer. That's the data type stored in it. It should auto increment, and it should be my primary key. So go ahead and save that, and then we run our code. I'll press Ctrl C first to stop the current instance, and then I'll write my node db underscore connect.js and run it. Okay, an error has come up. Let's check it. No database selected. I just remember, once you have created you are trying to create a table, you need to specify which database you are creating that table to. So I'll come here and then add it here, database, and then the name of our database was my_db. I save that, and then I run it again. And as you can see, our table has been created. So in the next lessons, we are going to see how we can add values to our table. That means now we have created a table, and we have created a table with 3 columns: an ID column, a name column, and an address column. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually insert data into our database table, right? So we'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.